In this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about Black Lives Matter because you may have heard that thing, Black Lives Matter, and what does that mean? And I've seen people use the hashtag Black Lives Matter, but then I've also seen people do the hashtag of All Lives Matter because it's like, we're not just focusing on one race, it's actually every life matters, every life is important. And that is completely true, but here's why using All Lives Matter in this instance kind of takes away from what Black Lives Matter represents. There's an amazing cartoon which has done its rounds on the internet. I believe the cartoonist is called Chris Straub. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. But this cartoon displays two houses. One of them is on fire, one of them isn't. And a person with a fire hose comes out and sprays a house that is not on fire and just says, all houses matter, all lives matter. And that's what the Black Lives versus the All Lives Matter statement really is about. Black Lives Matter isn't saying that all lives don't matter. It's not saying that black lives are more important than white lives or brown lives or pick any colour lives. It's not saying that. What it's saying is that in this instance, we are seeing black people getting mistreated by police and getting killed by police in a way that probably would not happen if that life was a white life, if that person was of a different race. Like I say, when I switched onto that video that morning about the death of George Floyd, I just said not again, because we're so used to seeing it. We're so used to seeing it. And all that Black Lives Matter is saying, look, can we have some equal treatment? Can we stop killing black people over these minor instances? Can we stop killing black people over a $20 forged check? Can we stop shooting at black people because they were running past a house and we thought they might be willing to commit a crime, so we'll just shoot them? That's what Black Lives Matter is about. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to play two videos on screen whilst I'm talking. The first video is of a young man in America called Tamir Rice, young man who was 12 years old who sadly lost his life at the hands of police. Like I say, this is an upsetting video, but what happened is Tamir Rice was a 12-year-old who was playing with a toy gun. Neighbours or someone close by called the police and said there's a young man with a gun out, and police arrived and they shot Tamir Rice within 2 seconds of arriving. No questions asked, no inquest, no put your hands up, none of that. They shot him within 2 seconds of arriving. Horrible, tragic. I contrast that video with another video of an incident which took place in the same year, 6 months before the death of Tamir Rice. And this video is of an older white gentleman in a place called Kalamazoo in Michigan. Again, I hope I've said that right. But this was a white gentleman who was walking around in the streets with a gun, fully on view, on show for all the world to see. Police were called, and instead of him being shot at within 2 minutes or 2 seconds of the police arriving, it was 40 minutes of a police officer's talking to this older gentleman, trying to defuse the situation. So 40 minutes, they talked with him, they discussed the situation with him, he sat down. It seemed like the most relaxed of situations, and at the end of the day, he wasn't killed. And that is why we talk about Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. In that first video, a black person with a gun is killed within 2 seconds. In the other video, you see a gentleman walking around with a gun, possibly with mental health issues. We don't know the full story, but with a gun out in public, could have shot anyone. But somehow the police managed to defuse the situation by giving him a chance and talking to him. That is what we talk about when we talk about Black Lives Matter. Gutting. So, having said all of that, maybe you're like me and it gets to you, maybe you write on Facebook, maybe you write on social media, maybe you talk to your friends about it, but you think, well, how do we change this? How do I make a difference? I don't live in the United States. I am not a politician. I can't put new laws into legislation. What difference can I make? And I think that's how lots of people who were rioting in the US probably feel as well. It's like, writing on social media or saying I'm annoyed isn't enough. It's like, I need to let out this anger and frustration at more and more black people just being killed. George Floyd isn't a one-off. This happens all the time. So what do we do to change this? Does sharing a post on Facebook make a difference? Does signing a petition make a difference? I'd say yes and no. I'd say yes because if we get the conversation out there enough, if we make sure that it becomes a regular conversation, almost like a water cooler conversation. And by a water cooler conversation, I mean one of those conversations that people talk about naturally all the time. If you imagine people in an office at work and they're talking about everyday things, like this becomes one of those conversations. At the moment, coronavirus is an everyday conversation. You can't get away from it. Brexit was an everyday conversation, which is kind of being overshadowed by the coronavirus, but Brexit is one of those water cooler conversations. What was on X Factor last night is a water cooler conversation. Sport, these are things that we talk about all the time. And this thing about violence towards marginalized communities, that needs to become a regular part of the conversation, because the more we talk about it, the more we understand it, the less we're willing to stand for it. The more understanding will go on and will eventually make some sort of difference. It has to filter out. The fact is, not enough people know that these things happen. So when enough people know that they are happening, that's when people start to change. That's when generations start to change. That's when we start to see real movement. That's when we start to see people stand up and vote for leaders who are actually going to represent those marginalized communities as well. I feel like there needs to be more education about what happens in parts of our world, that because we think we're not there, it doesn't touch us. We therefore think, well, it doesn't affect me. We need to be educated. We need to be willing to learn. Often we're only willing to learn about things that affect us, and often we're only willing to learn about things that affect our finances. I'll educate myself if it means I can climb up the employment ladder. I'll educate myself if it means I can make more money. But we just need to develop a bit more empathy in this world, man. We need to develop empathy and learn about things that don't necessarily affect us directly, but we need to care about other people. I really only learned about the suffragette movement, about women getting the right to vote, when I watched a film called Suffragettes about 4 years ago at the cinema. I didn't really know a lot about women voting before then, but it educated me and it opened my eyes, and it taught me that even in recent years, women in some countries are still fighting for the vote, like Saudi Arabia. But I had to dig into that. I had to learn that myself, and I could argue that I'm not a woman. I'm a man. I've been able to vote since I was a teenager. The female vote doesn't massively affect me, so why should I care? But we need to have empathy, because it's about caring for other people. That's saying, walk a mile in my shoes. We need to be willing to do that. Put yourself in someone else's shoes and understand what they're going through. Talking about the George Floyd situation, for many of us, especially living in the UK, we're not going down the street worrying that we're going to be arrested by police. We're not worried that we're going to be handcuffed and have knees put on our necks. We're not worried that we're going to be shot at based on the way that our police system works over here. But just because our situation isn't that like it is for a gentleman like a George Floyd, like an African-American male or female in the United States, doesn't mean that we think, well, it doesn't affect me, so therefore I don't need to care or take part in that. That saying, hear no evil, see no evil. It doesn't mean that the evil doesn't exist. The evil is still there. I think if I was to summarise what I'm trying to say is, look, what has happened in this past week in terms of violence against minority communities, against marginalised communities, it needs to become part of our national and international conversations. We all need to feel responsible. We all need to feel like we can say or do something about it. We all need to stand up. We need to speak up for those people who don't have a voice. We need to do something about that. And speaking out, making it a part of the regular conversation, understanding what racism is, understanding what something that might not affect you is, but affects other people and how it hurts them, understanding that and why it happens. That's what we need to be doing. So that needs to be part of the conversation. I'm probably going to do an actual audio podcast episode about this, because I feel like I've got more to say, and a little bit about racial politics, especially where I'm from, the gorgeous city of Bradford. So please check that out. You can go to sothisworks.co.uk when you'll see more podcasts and probably a few more videos a bit like this. Do your research. Google George Floyd. That person deserves to, be researched and looked at. We need to do that. Share this video. Tell people about it. Thank you for watching. Have conversations like this. If you've got any questions, by all means, message me, get in touch with me. But thank you for checking out this video. Until next time, take care.